try to relate to you things about my youth, which are important to me in remembrances and may be interesting to you, but if you get bored, tell me. First of all, I was born in Indiana. I was born in the back of a hardware store that my folks had. The house was part of the store, and that was my start. And as time went on, obviously it goes on. By the way, the hardware store was on a street where there weren't any houses really, and a half a block away was the main highway from Chicago to Florida. And so that was kind of an isolated area in many, many ways in terms of a lot of kids, etc. There weren't that many kids. But anyway, moving right along, somehow because the hardware store was there, somehow I always became interested in making money. As a kid, I mean, I would...
Out of the womb.
You cannot believe the things I did as a kid. I mean, I delivered papers, sold papers. I worked in a bowling alley setting pins when there were manual. You had to pick up the pins and put them in there, and you can go on forever. But the amazing thing is, I think back of the timing. As a kid, here I was after I had delivered afternoon papers for a while, and then had a morning paper route. Here I was on the 1st of December, 1939.
Wow.
I wasn't quite 8 years old, and I was folding my papers, and our house had, I didn't go into that part of the story, but I was folding my papers, and I had to run up to tell my parents that the Germans had just invaded Poland. Now can you imagine nowadays an 8-year-old kid, not quite 8, having a morning route, and after that, before that, I mean, my gosh, I mean, it was just, to me, amazing the kind of things we did. And I always was interested in making sure that I made the money. And my parents, our life at that time, we got up in the morning, and then from then till night, we were out doing whatever we wanted to do. And nobody checked up on us, nobody did anything. We just did our thing. And we did a lot of things, but none of them were bad. I mean, they were just things. and I never, well, like for instance, let's see, World War II started in 1941. In 1941, I was 10 years old, and the war started, and we were kids. We had a big empty lot next to us, a half a block or a block along, and we got into playing war games. And my gosh, the things we did, BB gun fights. I mean, BB gun, we would build places and fight with BB guns. And then I was always into chemistry and stuff. So there was a place up in northern Hammond, which is where I was born, which was a place you'd go for chemicals and things. And so I thought, well, that's a pretty good idea. I went and bought some little bottles and some sodium and potassium manganate, and I put those in the bottles, and those were our hand grenades. We'd throw them. I mean, just stupid things like that. But
I'm hearing this for the first time.
I mean, that's
You'd
what
be
I
on a
said.
terrorist watch list if you did that.
Who would have thought I would be an engineer or something like that?
How
But
many
anyway,
casualties were there?
those things happened, and then I was always
Jacob, plug your ears.
I was not only delivering papers, but when my sister Jeannie, who was born 4 years later, my folks had built a house next door to the hardware store, and we finally moved into a house. And that was
Grandpa built all the hardware store and
my
everything.
dad built all this stuff, and we moved in this house. And then as Jeannie grew older, and she would help me finally after she was 4 or 5 years old. And we would, at that time, you can't even understand the world. Sunday papers were not delivered. Sunday papers were sold, and we had carts with great big steel iron wheels that we'd ride, push down the street, and people would come out and buy the Sunday papers. And Jeannie would finally join me doing that stuff. And the other thing that I remember is, again, Jeannie, she and I went out one time and we did several things like that to sell seeds. Because we had a hardware store, we could get whatever we wanted to sell. And so we go out to sell these seeds, and we sell a package for 10 cents. And so we take the seeds back and go get an ice cream. I mean, that was kind of, but anyway, then I went on to do more, again, of selling papers and always working and making the money for spending. And we did a lot of things, you know, for instance, I'd go to the Chicago Cubs games up in Chicago, and from where I was in Hammond, Indiana, I had to get on the South Central Railroad and get to, but I did that as a kid, I mean, alone. And I can't even imagine that kind of a thing nowadays would be allowed, you know, but that's what happened. And then I ended up getting a newspaper stand in the city, Hammond, and it was just for the Saturday night for the Sunday papers. And I usually had somebody working with me, a cousin or a friend or something, and I would get these papers on Sunday night, and this was during World War II, by the way, and I would go to Calumet City, Illinois, which was a great big bars and burlesque place.
Isn't that a sister city of Hammond?
Well, it's right across the state line of Hammond. It was an Al Capone kind of a thing, you know, before, and it was they used to say there were 10,000 people live here and there's 10,000 bars. Now, it wasn't quite that bad, but it was that kind of a city. So I would go as a, let's see, that would have been maybe 11 years old. Let's see, it would have been 42, 40, 43 at the latest. So I was like 11 or 11 and a half, I don't know what it was. But I would go selling these papers across the state line into these bars, bootlegging the papers. And there'd be all these Navy, the sailors out there, you know, and it was amazing because I would sell a lot of papers. But I would also, you go up to in the bars and there'd be a sailor sitting there, and you say, "You want a paper? You know, double or nothing." And you can't believe how that worked. I got double. I got double all the time, and sometimes I didn't give them the paper. You know? But anyway, it was an interesting time period of my life. But again, I'm accentuating that I was always working to do something to make the money I needed to do. I mean, like as kids, we would go to the theater on Saturday, and they'd have double features. And of course, then the only way you got news was on the newsreel at the theaters. And they have double features, and we go to one double feature, and then we stop and have a hamburger and something at Steak and Shake, a place there, and then we go to another double feature. I mean, it was kind of stupid in a way, but that's what we did.
That was Saturday.
But anyway, then when I was, let's see, 1943, 44. Anyway, when I was a kid, 11 or 12, no, 12 or 13, my mom and dad went through a divorce. And by the way, they got back together later, so let me skip that part a minute. And my dad and I moved down to Florida. My sister stayed with my mother. And we went to Florida, and we lived on the main highway, Highway 1, because my dad was going to build a motel in Florida, and then build a motel in up north, Wisconsin, Michigan, someplace, so that the summers he spent in Michigan, etc., and the winters he spent in Florida. He bought the property, and it had a little house on it, and that's where we lived. But again, because I was involved with stuff all the time,